Have you ever sat down to watch an English movie without subtitles, telling yourself, okay, this time I'm going to understand it, only to find your brain turning into complete chaos? The words fly past like a blur, crashing into each other until they become nothing more than noise. Maybe you catch a random the and, or a lucky hello, but most of the dialogue feels like another language from another planet. Or maybe you've picked up an English article, a social media post, or even a simple instruction manual, and after reading the same paragraph 5 times, the meaning still slips away as if your eyes were staring at meaningless symbols. If that sounds familiar, I know exactly how you feel. I've been there too. And it's not just frustration. It can make you feel small, like there's this invisible wall between you and the rest of the world. But here's the thing I want you to hear. It's not your fault. And more importantly, that wall isn't unbreakable. It's not even a wall at all. It's just a locked door, and you haven't found the key yet. When I started my own journey with English, I thought the key was memorizing thousands of words or forcing grammar into my head until it stuck. I believed that if I just collected enough vocabulary, one day the pieces would magically fall into place. But it didn't work that way. What I eventually realized is that the real key isn't about learning more. It's about learning differently. It's about changing the way we approach listening and reading so they stop feeling like punishments and start feeling like gateways to connection. Think about how most of us were taught. If you want to get better at listening, just listen more. If you want to get better at reading, just read more. On the surface, it sounds logical. But imagine someone telling you to become a great runner by running every day, without ever teaching you how to breathe correctly, how to pace yourself, or how to avoid injuries. Sure, you might improve a little, but you'll also get exhausted, discouraged, and maybe even give up. That's exactly what happened to me. I used to put on BBC News or CNN at full volume, convinced that if I exposed myself long enough, the language would somehow soak into my brain like osmosis. Do you want to know the result? Most of the time, I fell asleep. That's not learning. That's torture with a nap at the end. It took me years of mistakes and experiments to realize that listening and reading aren't separate mountains to climb. They're two sides of the same coin. Both are about processing information, and to do that effectively, you need strategies, not just exposure. So let's start with listening, because that's where most people, including me, hit the biggest wall. Here's the first shift that changed everything for me. Stop trying to understand every single word. I know it sounds backwards. Isn't the whole point of listening to understand? But think about your own native language. Do you catch every word when your friends are talking fast? Or when you overhear a conversation on the bus? Not really. You don't need to. Your brain naturally filters for meaning. You catch the keywords, the context, the tone, and you fill in the gaps. That's how humans communicate. But when we switch to English, suddenly we demand perfection from ourselves. We expect to grab every syllable, every detail. And when we don't, we panic. That panic is what blocks real understanding. So here's what I started doing. Instead of straining to hear everything, I trained myself to relax and just look for the main signals. Imagine your brain as a radar scanning for important blips on the screen. If you're listening to a conversation about the weather, you don't need to catch every filler word. Just tune your radar to words like sunny, rain, or cold. Instantly, you get the picture. If you're watching a phone review, your radar should light up when you hear camera, battery, or fast. That's enough to follow the flow without drowning in details. And here's where the magic happens. When you stop overloading your brain with the impossible task of catching everything, you actually start catching more. The stress melts away, your focus sharpens, and slowly, your ears begin to tune into patterns naturally. Now, I want to share a practice that worked wonders for me. I call it intentional passive listening. You've probably heard advice like, immerse yourself in English, or just keep it on in the background while you work. That's fine, but background noise doesn't always teach you much. Intentional passive listening is different. Pick something short and enjoyable. A song you like, a 2-minute movie clip, or a short news snippet. The first time, just listen without pressure. Close your eyes if you want, and focus only on the rhythm, the intonation, the emotions in the voice. Don't even try to translate. The second time, grab a notebook and jot down any keywords you catch. It might be only 3 or 4 words, and that's perfectly fine. Then, check yourself by turning on the subtitles or reading the transcript. What you'll discover is that those few words were enough to give you a surprisingly accurate idea of what was going on. Over time, this trains your brain to filter, to connect, and to stay calm while listening. For me, this practice was like lifting a huge weight off my shoulders. Suddenly, listening wasn't about perfection, it was about progress. And progress feels good. It keeps you motivated to keep going. But listening is only half of the picture. Once you start to feel more confident with your ears, something amazing happens. You'll naturally want to explore with your eyes. 2. Reading becomes the next frontier. And here's the truth. Reading can feel just as overwhelming as listening if you approach it the wrong way. Too many learners treat it like a test, obsessing over every unknown word, reaching for the dictionary after every sentence. I used to do that, and it turned reading into a slow, painful crawl. But it doesn't have to be that way. Reading can be light, playful, even adventurous if you know how to step onto the right path. And that's exactly where we're heading next. When I first tried to make reading a daily habit, I made the same mistake most learners do. I picked up a novel way too advanced for my level, and on the very first page I found myself stopping every 2 sentences to look up words in the dictionary. 10 minutes later, I had read half a page and felt more tired than if I had run a marathon. That's when it hit me. No wonder I hated reading in English. It wasn't reading, it was punishment. That if you've been through the same thing, here's the good news. The problem isn't you, and it isn't English either. The problem is that you've been using the wrong material at the wrong time. Imagine teaching a child to swim by throwing them into the ocean during a storm. They'll sink, and they'll also develop a lifelong fear of water. But if you let them play in a shallow pool, they'll enjoy it, gain confidence, and eventually move on to deeper waters. Reading works exactly the same way. That's why I started using what are called graded readers. These are books written specifically for learners at different levels. They use simple vocabulary, clear grammar, and short chapters, but still tell real stories that are interesting and fun. My first graded reader was a short detective story. The sentences were easy, the plot was exciting, and for the first time in my life, I could actually finish a book in English. Do you know how empowering that feels? Suddenly, reading wasn't a mountain anymore. It was a series of small steps I could actually climb. Here's the beautiful part. Once you finish one story, you're hungry for another. And little by little, you start noticing that words repeat, phrases become familiar, and grammar patterns sneak into your brain without you even realizing it. You're not memorizing, you're absorbing. That's when reading becomes addictive in the best way possible. But let's be honest, not everyone is excited to sit down with a book. Maybe you're more into social media, short articles, or even gaming. That's totally fine. The trick is to choose materials that you actually enjoy, because motivation is everything. If you love sports, read sports news. If you're into technology, read tech blogs. If you like romance, grab short stories about relationships. The key is this: if you're curious, you'll keep going. If you're bored, you'll quit. Now, let me share a technique that changed the way I read forever. I call it layered reading. It works like this. The first time you read something, don't stop. Even if you don't understand every word, just keep going until the end. Think of it as watching a movie. You wouldn't pause every few seconds to ask what's happening, right? You'd ruin the experience. Same with reading. The goal of the first round is just to get the big picture. Then, the second time, go back and look for the parts that confused you. Circle or highlight the words you don't know. But here's the important part. Don't rush to translate them. First, try to guess the meaning from the context. Only if you're still lost should you check the dictionary. And even then, don't obsess over memorizing, just let the word be. Believe me, if it's important, you'll see it again and again, and it will stick naturally. Finally, if the material is short and fun, read it a third time out loud. This does two amazing things. It trains your mouth to get comfortable with English sounds, and it trains your brain to connect written words with spoken language. Suddenly, you're practicing listening, reading, and speaking all at once. That I remember one evening when I read a short story aloud to myself, and without even realizing it, I started acting the dialogue, giving each character a different voice. I felt a little silly at first, but then I realized something. For the first time, I wasn't studying English, I was living it. That shift in attitude is powerful. When language becomes play instead of pressure, progress happens faster than you think. But let me pause here and ask you a question. What's the last thing you read in English that you truly enjoyed? Was it a funny meme, a comment on YouTube, a short news article, or maybe a children's story? Share it in the comments. I'd love to know, and who knows, maybe someone else will discover something new to read thanks to you. Now, while reading and listening can both be practiced separately, something magical happens when you combine them. Think about audiobooks or YouTube videos with subtitles, or even podcasts that offer transcripts. When your ears and eyes work together, your brain forms stronger connections. You hear the sounds, you see the words, and you understand the meaning all at the same time. It's like hitting three birds with one stone point. One of the simplest yet most effective exercises I ever did was reading along with subtitles while watching TV shows. At first, I kept my eyes glued to the text, but over time, I noticed I was relying less on the subtitles and more on my ears. It's like training wheels on a bike. You use them at the start, but one day you realize you don't need them anymore. And let me tell you, the moment you can watch something in English without subtitles and actually understand it, that's one of the most satisfying victories you'll ever feel. Here's the best part. This practice doesn't feel like studying at all. You're just watching a show, listening to music, or enjoying a story. But underneath, your brain is working hard, building pathways, strengthening memory, and sharpening understanding. Learning English this way is like sneaking vegetables into a delicious meal. You're feeding your brain without even noticing. So far, we've looked at listening in a new light and explored how reading can become enjoyable instead of overwhelming. We've also seen how combining them multiplies the effect. But there's still one more piece of the puzzle we need to talk about: how to make all of this stick in the long run. Because let's face it, starting is easy. Continuing, day after day, is the real challenge. When I think back to all the times I tried and failed to learn English, there's one common reason. I gave up too soon. I expected fast results. I wanted to understand movies in a week, hold conversations in a month, and read novels in 3. And when it didn't happen, I thought, maybe I'm just not good at languages. But here's what I wish someone had told me earlier. Language learning isn't a sprint, it's a marathon. The real secret isn't talent, it's consistency. So how do we make sure we actually stay consistent with listening and reading? The answer is simple but powerful. Make it part of your lifestyle, not just your study routine. Think about brushing your teeth. You don't debate with yourself every morning about whether you feel like doing it, you just do it. It's automatic. If you can turn English practice into something that feels just as natural, you'll keep going even on the days when you don't feel motivated. One of the easiest ways to do this is by creating what I call English moments throughout your day. For example, instead of scrolling on social media in your native language, follow a few English-speaking creators. Instead of listening to the same music on repeat, try an English playlist while you're cooking or walking. Instead of reading the news in your own language, check the English version of the same story. These tiny switches don't take extra time, but over weeks and months, they add up to an incredible amount of exposure. I once met a friend who learned English almost entirely from watching cooking shows. Every evening after work, she'd relax in front of the TV, not with textbooks, but with chefs explaining recipes. At first, she only understood the steps because she could see what they were doing. But little by little, words like chop, stir, season, and bake became second nature to her. Eventually, she started reading English recipes online and even joined cooking forums in English. What amazed me was not just how her vocabulary improved, but how natural her listening skills became, simply because she turned something she loved into an English habit. That's the magic formula. Interest plus consistency equals progress. You don't have to force yourself into boring materials or long study sessions. Instead, you design your daily life so that English is always around you in enjoyable ways. And the more you enjoy it, the less it feels like work. But let's be real. Even with fun methods, there will be days when you feel tired, when your brain refuses to cooperate, or when progress feels invisible. That's normal. Every learner goes through it. The key is not to judge yourself on one bad day. Think of it like going to the gym. If you miss a workout, it doesn't mean you failed. It just means tomorrow is another chance. In the same way, missing one day of reading or listening doesn't erase your progress. What matters is what you do most of the time, not every single time. Now, let me share something that might surprise you. Progress in language often feels invisible until one magical moment. You'll be reading a story and realize you didn't stop once to check the dictionary. Or you'll watch a YouTube video and suddenly understand the jokes without subtitles. Or you'll overhear someone speaking English in real life and, instead of panic, you'll catch yourself nodding along. Those moments feel like fireworks because they show you that all the small daily efforts have been building quietly in the background. And when that happens, please celebrate it. Too often, learners focus only on what they can't do yet, instead of appreciating how far they've come. Did you understand a whole paragraph today that would have confused you 6 months ago? That's progress. Did you listen to a podcast and get the main idea even if you missed some details? That's progress. Did you finish a book, no matter how simple? That's a huge milestone. Remember, fluency isn't about perfection. It's about progress. If you're watching this video right now, I want you to ask yourself, what's one small habit you can start today to make English a natural part of your life? Maybe it's listening to 10 minutes of an audiobook before bed. Maybe it's reading one article during your lunch break. Maybe it's leaving a comment in English under this video. Whatever it is, keep it small and realistic. Because small habits stick, and when they stick, they grow. And speaking of comments, I'd love to hear from you. What's your favorite way to practice listening and reading in English? Do you prefer podcasts, stories, songs, movies, or something else? Share it below. I read every single comment, and your ideas might inspire someone else on their learning journey. Before we finish, let me leave you with this thought. Learning a language is not just about grammar or vocabulary. It's about opening doors. Every time you listen to a podcast, you're hearing someone's perspective from across the world. Every time you read a story, you're stepping into another culture. Every time you understand a song lyric, you're connecting with the emotions of another human being. English is not just a skill, it's a bridge. And the more you walk across it, the wider your world becomes. So if you've ever doubted yourself, if you've ever thought, I'm too slow or I'll never get there, I want you to remember this. Every single person who is fluent today once struggled exactly like you. They didn't wake up fluent. They built it step by step, habit by habit, mistake by mistake. And if they can do it, so can you. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. If you found this video helpful, please give it a like, share it with a friend who's also learning English, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more tips and motivation. Most importantly, keep showing up for yourself every day, even in small ways, because your future self will look back and be grateful that you started today. Stay curious, stay consistent, and keep believing in yourself. You've got this.